everyone for joining us here tonight, especially going up against dueling town halls with presidential candidates. But we already know what they're going to say. We don't know what Joe and Alan are going to say. And before we start, I just want to say one of the jokes we've always heard as Jews is they talk about the shortest books, the smallest books ever written are Jewish sports heroes. So we're here tonight to somewhat dispel that rumor because Joe's written a book called Jewish Sports Legends, the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame in its 5th edition. And there's 324 pages. It's not the smallest book ever written. It's loaded with world champions, Olympians, and famous athletes. And tonight we're going to talk about them and the Hall of Fame and Joe and Alan's involvement. So let's start first with Joe and tell us about your connection to Maccabi USA, how you got involved and how you got involved with the Hall of Fame.
1972, I was invited to try out for the U.S. Maccabi cricket team. I had never played cricket, but they were looking for over-the-hill baseball players. So I tried out and I made the team. And it was kind of a kick in the head, first of all, playing cricket in an international competition. And my mother's from Palestine, from Eretz Yisrael. And my brother was living there. He was in the IDF. So I got a trip to Israel to play cricket. I had such a good time when we got back from Israel. Some of my guys said, "Did you see that other sport that the people that went out on the bus went with us?" It was called lawn bowling. And sure enough, a half a block from my house was a bowling green at the park in Beverly Hills. So I went to try out and I went to see what it was, and it seemed like all old guys were playing. I figured, how hard can this be? Got a bunch of guys together and we applied to be the US team for the 77 games. And me and a few others got hooked on the sport, and I played in the Maccabi through 1989, after which I was the chairman of the team into the 2000s. So that's how I got involved. And on the way, I became a vice president of U.S. Committee Sports for Israel, the forerunner of Maccabi USA, and ran fundraising dinners and so on and so forth. And one of the fundraising dinners was this Jewish Sports Hall of Fame dinner in Beverly Hills, California, which took on a life of its own in 1979. So that's a sort of a brief history.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Joe. Alan, how about you? You've had a long career in this organization, in this movement. Tell us about it, please.
Well, I don't want to bore you, but I think it started in 1961. I was living in Israel, working at a Hadassah hospital as a volunteer, helping to set up the new hospital pharmacy in Ein Kerem. One day I saw an ad in the Jerusalem Post looking for English-speaking volunteers. I drove from Jerusalem to Ramat Gan, walked into the office and said, "I'd like to, volunteer." They said, "How did you get here?" I said, "I drove my car." "You have a car?" "Yes." "Okay, you're hired." I became the driver for Robbie Atlas, who nobody knows that name. It's on this list, who was the chairman of the organizing committee. And that was my first involvement with the Maccabi in itself. Then in 1973 and maybe April 73 or so, I was the chairman of JWV National Volleyball Committee. JWV is a forerunner for JCCA, Jewish Community Centers. And we had a tournament in Chicago. And then after the tournament, they said, "Well, we need to have a place." This is 72. And after the tournament, we need a place in 73. I put my hand up and said, "We'll have it in Washington." I had the tournament. The winning team at that time represented the U.S. in the Maccabi games, and nationally was from L.A. And that's where I met Leonard Reifman. And that's another whole story. I won't go into it. But at any rate, after it was over and the inductions are over for the winning team, a man named Hal Zimmerman came up to me and said, and Hal Zimmerman, for those that you don't know, was one of the founders of the United States Committee Sports for Israel, one of the 4 founders. Said, "We'd like you to get involved." The next thing I knew, I was a sports chairman for the 77 games. So from 73 to 77, I was the all sports chairman. So that's just briefly.
And also tell, one of the best parts of our Maccabi team now, it used to be a one-dimensional sporting event. It became a multi-dimensional event when we added the pre-camp, now known as Israel Connect. Tell us about how that got started.
Well, it was in 1985. Bob Spivak was the chairman, and I was the sports chairman again. And I said to him, I think we need to bring the team together at Rutgers and have a little pre-camp, get everybody together and meet each other. Of course, you just go over to Israel and everybody goes off in their own direction. So he said, fine, it's okay with him. So we had a pre-camp in 85, and then that was very successful. Then he expanded it, and Billy Stearman over Sholem and I then took the chairmanship of the pre-camp for the 89 games. And then Billy got more people involved with the religious aspect to it or whatever. So that grew, and you guys took it 5 steps further than we ever thought about doing it. But we also had the bar bat mitzvah, and that I like to give credit to Leonard Riefman of Sholem, because he really pushed it for the 89 games, the first thing at Masada.
Thanks, Alan. So Joe, tell us about how did you get the idea for the hall? How did it start? How did you get it off the ground?
I got the idea coming home on the plane from the 77 Maccabi. It was my second games, and my group was a little bit older than the rest of the kids on the plane, and it was such a wonderful experience for me and for the other guys in my group. But I could see that it was a wonderful experience for all the rest of the kids, and it seemed terrible that in the United States it was a secret. People in the West, on the East Coast, might have known of something, the Jewish community, but on the other side of the Mississippi, we're not close. The Jewish community is not the same in closeness. We don't know who lives next door or down the block all the time. And I thought, what a great way. How can we promote this? And at the time I was a television producer and a former press agent. And I always thought of doing things bigger than life. And I was talking to the guys on the plane, what if we had a Hall of Fame? We got all these great Jews together, and the great Jewish athletes together. And we use them to promote the up and coming Jewish athletes. Because if you lived in a Jewish neighborhood, most the stars of your high school basketball, football, and baseball teams and other teams were Jewish. So it wasn't that Jewish people didn't play the game. They just weren't known for playing the game. And the ones that made the most jokes about Jews being my sport is matzo ball rolling, that type of thing. The ones who made those jokes were Jews themselves. And one thing led to another. We formed a committee. We took a vote. And the people who voted were most of the people, if you were on the committee, on the executive board of Sports for Israel at that time, you were the people who voted for the first class of people who got elected to the Hall of Fame. And then we said, what are we going to do now? We elected these people. We'll run a dinner. So using the Friars Club as a model, we ran a dinner like that for 18 of the greatest Jewish athletes in the United States. 10 showed up, 4 relatives of deceased showed up, and 4 others, including one guy who lived about 4 blocks from the hotel, did not show up. I won't mention Mark Spitz's name, but he didn't come because he was told that it was a nothing event, that he shouldn't come. He later, by the way, we had a special event for him, and he couldn't have been more gracious. And that night took on a life of its own. I think Alan was there.
Well,
Were you there?
Yes, I was.
There were only 2 people from Sports for Israel who thought it was important enough to come out. And that was Warren Abrams, the chairman or the president of Sports for Israel, and Alan. Alan was I wasn't that very close with Alan, but we know each other. But he got all excited about the event, and it just took off from there. We had one more American induction the following year, and then Alan found the location at Wingate Institute that was building a student union. And they agreed to put in a permanent exhibit, which we call the museum. And we've been there for 40 years.
So,
There you go.
Alan, as far as Wingate, which is where it's held, have they given you more space over the years, or has it been pretty much the same?
Well, the original space was the foyer, 5,000 square feet foyer. I had a long connection to Wingate starting back in 73, 77. So in 79, after the ceremony, and I told Joe that we just can't have a Hall of Fame in name only, we have to have it a place, and it has to be somewhere. So I went to Israel, met with the different groups, and found that Wingate was the best fit for us, space-wise. They give us the space, and they gave us a space, but they said you have to raise the money to build it. So, which I did, and we raised enough money to build it, and we've updated it, and it still needs updating, but we're working on it.
It's great. And so I want to ask you, what's the story about the selection process? Who selects the nominees? What are the timelines for this? How does it work? How does it go from selection until someone gets inducted?
Well, anybody can submit anybody during the year. There's no formal application to fill out. Send us, it used to be send us by mail or call us on the phone. Now you can email and send us the qualifications, why you think that the person should be elected to the Hall of Fame. We're not interested in the great fundraising that they do outside and the other activities that they do that are not sports. What have they done in sports? And believe it or not everybody knows, even in America and the United States, knows everybody who is or was Jewish, who did terrific things, or they think somebody who isn't Jewish is Jewish, and they submit the applications. The chairman of the Hall of Fame, I've been the chairman since 1990 when Alan took over as the chairman of the whole Hall of Fame. And before me, it was Haskell Cohn. Some of you probably remember the name. He was very active with Sports for Israel. And he was a sports writer, and he had been the publicist for the original NBA. So he handled it his way. I handled it by the submission of names and credentials. And then I make up the ballot. My determination, who should be on the ballot, based on, if you want, I'll tell you what the criteria, there are criteria. And well, I won't even read it, but I'll just tell you. You have to have been a world champion, a gold medalist an Olympic gold medalist, a multi-Olympic medalist that didn't win a gold, a world record holder, been elected to the Hall of Fame of your own sport, and a few other categories. And if the person can fit into those categories, we put them on the ballot. And then there's a group of international selection committee made up of mostly people who have been or are involved in the Maccabi games from England, from Australia, from Canada, from Germany, from South Africa, all over the place. And they get a ballot and they vote for whoever they vote for. And then the ballot is sent out on August 1st of every year, on or about. And on or about September 15th, the ballot is returned to me. I count the ballots and do all that stuff. And I notify Alan, who was elected. And Alan and I try to find all these people to inform them that they've been elected to the Hall of Fame. And that's probably the hardest deal of all, because some of these people are long gone. If they're from Brussels or from Italy or from Russia, Alan found Yuri Lyapkin, who who you don't know who he is, but he was a great hockey player for Russia. Alan found him by his own detective work this past year, and he'll be announced as a 2021 honoree. But we go through that process until December 1st. And on December 1st, we send out an announcement to the media who's been elected. And that's how we do it.
And Alan, correct, Alan, you're the person that does the communicating, right?
There's actually two other categories. There's the Lifetime Achievement Award and the Award of Excellence, and that's something that I do.
Well, yeah, but
Mr. Trump,
there are other categories too. And the Lifetime Achievement Award started in the early 90s, which was a suggestion of Alan's. And what's the other one called?
Award of Excellence.
Yeah.
Award of Excellence. Those are decided by the chairman. That doesn't, there's no selection committee, but with input of various people, but but that's basically the way that's chosen.
So Alan, how many members are actually in the hall as of this time?
Joe would know the answer. Over 420, 430?
Something like
He
that.
just did the book. He just did the book. He'll remember the.
I only write them. I don't count them. I only write them.
So Alan, you have the honor of communicating to people when they made it into the hall, right?
Yes.
And so what do? You call that? You try to call them?
No, usually we get the address and I send them a letter. I don't do an email. We get an address and a lot of work. We wind up sending them an official letter announcing that they've been elected to the Hall of Fame.
So let's talk a little bit about the athletes who are in the Hall of Fame. Who would you say, Alan, are the most famous people that are in the hall?
Well, Joe probably has a better answer to that, but with Hank Greenberg, Mark Spitz, Sandy Koufax. I mean, these are the greats. Joe is the expert on the ranking, Dolph Shays, so forth. But Joe would know if he wants to rank the top 1 to 50, who is the number 1 to number 50. I don't know if he can even do that, but he would have a better idea. If you want to know who are the best of the best, the original 18 that were elected in 1979 are probably at that point the best of the best. Wouldn't you say, Joe?
Well, in the opinion of the committee that year, they were the best of the best. And some of them you shouldn't even argue about. Sandy Koufax and Barney Ross and Benny Leonard, two boxers I just mentioned. But a star or who's the best is in the eye of the beholder. So rather than go by opinion of who was the greatest, we look at the record. And if they have achieved the highest levels of sport, those are the people that are the best. Case in point, Mark Spitz won 7 gold medals at the 72 Olympics. It was the most medals in any sport that anybody had won up to that time. In 2000, Lenny Kreiselberg won 4 gold medals in the same sport in swimming. Does that mean Lenny Kreiselberg is not as good a swimmer as Mark Spitz? Mark Spitz did it at a certain time, and Lenny Kreiselberg did it at a certain time. But they both reached a level where if they weren't the best, because that's arguable, they were among the best. Here in Los Angeles, they're currently debating whether Michael Jordan or LeBron James are the best of all time. They played in different times. They played with different things that applied to their sport. The game was played differently. And same thing in the pool. I think all of Spitz's records have been broken. So are the people who broke Spitz's records better than Spitz? I don't think so. It's what happened at the time that you played.
It's always difficult to compare different generations like that. I agree with you. So we know Spitz and we know Sandy Koufax. These are no-brainers. Everyone knows them. They're iconic Jewish legends. Who in the hall has accomplished the most that nobody knows about these people?
Agnes Coletti in the gymnastics. How many medals? Eight medals, Olympic medals she won?
She won it. I think she won 12 Olympic medals. Maria Gorovkovskaya from Russia, who won 7 gymnastics medals at one time. Now the question is, who did she compete against? Because was she that good, or the people she was competing against not that good? And so she won the medals that she won. You know what I suggest? For those that are well-to-do, go buy my new book, Jewish Sports Legends. It's just out. It's only out 4 weeks. It makes a wonderful Hanukkah gift or bar mitzvah gift. Or if you're cheapy, you can go online to www.jewishsports.net and get all that stuff for free.
So of the great ones in your hall, which are the ones that have competed in the Maccabi, of the most famous ones?
Well, Spitz, Mitch Gaylord. Mitch Gaylord's, for those of you that don't know, is a gymnast at the '84 Olympics, won 4 medals, created a few moves that are still, that were inventive for gymnastics that are still being used.
Dan Spiro, Dick Savitt, did they, Joe? I can't remember. Dick Savitt, Dan Spiro.
Dick Savitt was a tennis player.
Yeah. Did he participate in the 60s or the 50s? In the Kreiselberg, yeah.
I don't know. I didn't know. I didn't really know what anybody just said, but it's very hard for me. There's over 400 people in the Hall of Fame, and I just got finished writing about all of those people, and they're kind of compacted in my head.
Just as an aside, I have a Mitch Gaylord story. In 1981, I was in my first Maccabi team. I also made the World University Games team. So I was really full of myself that I'm the greatest thing ever. So by chance, the fencers and the gymnasts were both at Wingate at that time. And we were sitting at some communal lunch table, and I was holding court like I was the greatest thing since sliced bread. The guy I was holding court with was a guy who went on to win 4 Olympic medals. And I'm sure he was quite amused by me holding court that time. But anyway, at least I can laugh about it. So when we look at some of the sports, what are some of the sports that we've really excelled at, the Jewish athletes have really excelled at, especially in your Hall of Fame? Which ones would you say?
Basketball, fencing, boxing for sure. Strength sports. Jews have been very good at strength sports. You know, in the first half of the 20th century, immigrants were the ones that played most of the sports, boxing, baseball. There weren't very many Jews in baseball, but there weren't very many university scholars playing baseball either. Football had mostly people that came out of college. And so there were some Jews. What's that? What does it say?
No, I see Laurie Commissar is on. That's why.
Swimming, something like over, I think there were 42 medals in swimming won since Spitz, in Olympic medals, since Spitz won in 68, since he won his first medals at the Olympics. And there must be 7 or 8 swimmers in a compact time that have broken world records and won gold medals in their classes that they play. That's the best I can think of right now.
So it's interesting that you mentioned Jews were successful in strength sports, because the conventional wisdom was that Jews weren't good in sports to begin with, and that we weren't strong in general. And when I looked at the book, I noticed that swimmers, we had a lot of great swimmers, 23 members in your hall, basketball, 35. But the one that had the most shocked me was boxing with 44. So tell us about the time when Jews dominated the boxing world and why there's so many in your hall.
Well, the first half of the 20th century, immigrants or the first generation Americans or those that came over on the boat, doors weren't open for Jews or Italians or Irish in a lot of business and industry. And when you were a kid, you were mad that you couldn't get things done. Your family wasn't making any money. You couldn't get things that other kids got. And a lot of tough kids came out of that. So that's who your boxers were. In fact, there was an Irish boxer named Kid McCoy who was Jewish. That wasn't his name, Kid McCoy. There were a couple of others that changed their names in other weight classes in order to fill the weight class with people, with boxers who people would come to see, because there was no television then. And there was very little radio, and you couldn't see very much on the radio. So you had to come to the fights. So the Jews would cheer against the Irish, and the Irish against the Lithuanians, and the Lithuanians against the guys from Belgium, and so on and so forth. But you know, the idea about Jews not being athletic comes from Jews. I mean, it starts with Jews. Because if you grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, you looked around, you saw Orthodox people walking around. If you went to school or advanced in school, your parents wanted you to learn so you could get a good Leben, so you can get a good living, you can make a living. They didn't want you doing what the Goyim did, you know, what the Gentiles did. But kids wanted to be Americans. So, I mean, not every kid, but enough kids wanted to be Americans. So they got themselves into sports. But the ones who became writers made jokes about different things about their own people. I in my other life, when I wasn't doing this book, was a producer, and I produced a comedy series and represented a number of comedians. And invariably, the comedians would joke about their background. And this may come as a surprise to many of you, but many of the comedians are Jewish, particularly from the 40s, 50s, the 60s, and 70s. And so they made fun about their mother's cooking, and their father did this, and their uncle was like this. And they even made movies using some of those characters. So in the picture Airport, if you remember the original Airport, the stewardess comes around with a fan of books, and she says, "Can I give you something light to read?" And the guy says, "What do you have?" And the stewardess says, Polish scientists, Polish scientists, Italian war heroes, and Jewish athletes. And he says, "I'll take the Jewish athletes one." It was a very thin thing. Anyways, Jews were their own megahorn for
that.
the Bubba Mices about Jewish people not playing sports.
So I got, just as a little nugget here, Jed Margolis messaged me that Dick Sagittarius and Don Spiro were Maccabi alums, but you should know that Sandy Koufax tried out for basketball and was cut.
Did you? Well, Jeff Margolis was very valuable to me when we first started the Hall of Fame. So hello to Jeff Margolis. I don't know if he's on the screen here. What do I want to say about old age, senior moment?
While you think about Alan, this is off the beaten track a little for tonight's conversation, but a question came up about Tell us a little bit about your involvement in the JCC Maccabi games.
JCC Maccabi game. In 1981, after the games in 1981, Ari Rosenzweig, who was the chairman of the organizing committee at that time, came to the US and visited me at my home and said, Alan, how can we get the kids in the United States involved in Maccabi activities and Maccabi World Union? Because they, at that time, really weren't big in the United States. So I said, well, what we can do is we can hold the youth games, like the Maccabi games for kids 12 to 16 through the Jewish community centers. And he said, that'd be a great idea. Went back to New York, talked to Yoram Eyal, who many of you know, who was the shliach from Maccabi World Union to the Jewish community in the United States. We called a guy in Memphis, Tennessee, named Uri Sheffer, who some of you know, Dr. Uri Sheffer, who was the head of Wingate and also was the sports director for the government of the state of Israel. Now, but it wasn't then. And Memphis agreed to host the games. Uri Sheffer came to Washington and we had a meeting and talked about how we could put it together. And in 1982, we had the first games in Memphis, 300 kids, and that's how it started. And the second games maybe were in Toronto, maybe Roy would know, I forget, it was Toronto or Montreal, one of the two, I forget which one was first. They were in both places, but one of them, and we went there in 84, and then maybe in 85 or 86, it started yearly. And now it was up to 6,000 a year. Now with the COVID, I don't know what's gonna happen to them, but that's how it started.
Interesting. By the way, it was Dick Savitt and Don Spiro who were
But I
Maccabi.
said, I think I said Dick Savitt and Don.
Yeah.
Spiro.
So I want to ask you guys, Alan and Joe, are either of you involved in any regional Jewish sports Hall of Fames in the United States?
Well, in the beginning, when we built the Hall of Fame, we sent out letters to some of the Halls of Fame that were established at that time. And I said that we'd like to recognize you on a pillar in the Hall of Fame. And then the Washington Hall of Fame, actually through Ricky Reff, who really pushed for it and decided to have a Hall of Fame dinner and in Washington. And that was for some other centers because they raised a lot of money in Washington for the Hall of Fame. So we recognized those Halls of Fame that were established. And then as the years went on, some newer ones became. But I didn't personally go around to all the different cities to try to establish them. But we let it be known that, you know, the International Hall of Fame would recognize any local JCC Sports Halls of Fame.
For my part, I helped, and I was the chairman of the Southern California Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. There was another Sherman involved in that one. It was his idea. His name was Eli Sherman, who was a coach at the several Maccabi over the years. And he was the director of the JCC in Los Angeles, the West Side JCC. And he wanted a Hall of Fame, and I helped him do that. And I worked on the one in Washington that Alan just mentioned, San Francisco, Detroit, Atlanta. You know, after you do it, there's a formula that cuts through what you cut through. And it's not difficult to do, you just have to do it.
So yes, I was involved in a regional Jewish Sports Hall of Fame along with my buddy Jay Blumenfeld, who's on the call. It was the Metro West JCC Sports Hall of Fame. Do you guys remember that?
Yes.
And it died early. Yeah.
What city?
It was in New Jersey. It was in West Orange, New Jersey. And it lasted for a few years, but sometimes these things go, if the people who were interested aren't involved anymore, it fell by the wayside. That's what happened with that.
Yeah, Leland Faust, who I noticed was here somewhere. He was involved with the San Francisco one, Hall of Fame, Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. But before him, there was another man who, right when we first started the Hall of Fame in the late 70s, he wanted to do one up up in his area, and he did, but he didn't get very much traction. And I think somewhere along the line, Leland got involved and made it happen.
Thanks. So one of our viewers, Michael Sheff, asked, is Red Auerbach in the hall? And the answer is yes. And I'm just going to read some of the names from the basketball inductees. Red Auerbach, Sam Bolter, Lou Bender, Harry Boykoff, Tal Brody, Larry Brown, William Davidson, Max Friedman, Harry Glickman. There's some great names. Nat Holman. And Nat Holman was once the president of U.S. Committee Sports for Israel back in the 70s. That's correct, right?
Yes.
Correct.
And it's possible Nat Holman is responsible for me being here right now, because my dad was a city college guy, same as Nat. And Nat invited him up to his summer camp, and they stayed friends or whatever. And my father, I think that's why my father got involved, actually. Sort of interesting.
Wonderful man.
Nice man. Do you remember, was there anything special about the 2001 induction ceremony because of the Intifada and everything that was going on?
Yeah, well, sure, because we were back and forth whether we would go or whether we wouldn't go. And for those of you that were there with us in 2001, marching into the stadium, yeah, I think about it now, it's brings tears to my eyes. And then being able to hold a ceremony in 2001 at the Hall of Fame was exceptional.
As far as Maccabi World Union is building a new Maccabi museum, so to speak, are you involved with that at all, Alan?
No, not really. They wanted us to be very frank with everyone. They wanted us to move the Hall of Fame to Maccabi World Union, but they couldn't give us 5,000 square feet, and also they didn't have the funds to move it. The Hall of Fame is great and where it is, but unfortunately, it's a known fact that it's a ring gate. It should be a ring gate because of the fact that it's the National Institute of Sport and so forth, but as far as people visiting it, it doesn't belong there. It belongs in Tel Aviv. But that's today, and now to build a new museum, and there is plans, there are people that want to build an Israel Sports Museum, much larger than anything the Hall of Fame or the Maccabi Museum in Israel. Now that it's a government institution, maybe it will happen, I don't know, but there are some people, but it's a $10 million project, and it certainly won't be an Alan Sherman project, I can tell you that. So if it happens, that's great, but I don't know. But the Maccabi Museum should be great. We support it. I've sent them some memorabilia that they can put in it, but no, we're not directly involved in it per se.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys know of any Olympic medalists or world champions who are not yet in the hall?
Yeah, there are. We don't elect everybody in the same year that we know about. And we try to keep, because our space is so limited. When we first started, the first year there was 18, 79. The next year there was something like 15. And then there was 18 again after that. And then we went down to 12. And we kind of maintained 10, 12, 10, 12 over the years. But we've been doing this a long time now. We have no space there. We've built, if you've been there, and you've been there, Jeff, and some of you who I see in the little rectangles have been there, there's nowhere to go. We've built on top of different things. We've taken out several display cabinets in order to accommodate the medal cases, the display cases for the newer honorees. And I believe we're out of space now, right, Alan?
Yeah, we've taken one of the pillars, and now we're putting the names on one of the pillars. We reconfigured it because we don't have any more triangles. So for the next, at least the next 50 honorees, will be on a pillar. There won't be a triangle with their photo.
And I mean, we didn't expect, I don't know about Alan, but I certainly didn't expect to still have the Hall of Fame for all these years. And in the future, the Hall of Fame can continue far beyond Alan and I. Where are they going to put the honorees? And presuming they're going to continue to honor people who qualify for being in the Hall of Fame. Another question that we have is, who is Jewish? There are people with one Jewish parent and two Jewish parents who either say they're Jewish or don't say that, or say they're not Jewish. And one says, I'm as Jewish as anybody, but Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. Now, in addition to sounding humorous to me, that person believes that. And is that person, I mean, number one, the person is entitled to believe anything that they want, but should we consider that person for the Hall of Fame? Or the person who either mother or father is Jewish, but they either don't observe or they do observe Jewish life. If it's only the father and not the mother, that's not halacha, that's not Jewish law. And if it's Jewish mother who's Jewish, but she practiced Catholicism, do we consider the Jewish blood in the girl Jewish blood? So those are things, those are honoree possibilities that future people involved with the Hall of Fame are going to have to figure out, because we haven't.
So somebody asked me a question here. Are there any members of the Hall on the call on the call right now? I don't know, but I could just say that I'm very proud to say that my father is in the Hall. And Alan, when you contacted me, I have to say that was one of the proudest moments ever when you gave me that good news. It was very, very special. Very nice.
My pleasure. You kidding? It's great.
Thanks. Steve, you want to put up a couple pictures here that maybe we can talk about?
Well, we have 2 Lifetime Achievement Award people, 3 Lifetime Achievement Award people.
Thank you, Jay.
Roy Solomon and Harry Swimmer that I see they're on the call. They're Lifetime Achievement Award winners in the.
That is awesome. And Roy, thanks for joining us tonight.
Where's Roy?
Nice to see you.
Hi, Roy. This was the first inductions. And Sid Luckman's not in the picture. But I imagine you know who most of these people are. That's Sylvia Ween. She was a champion bowler. That's Warren Abrams, who was president of...
chairman of the organizing committee.
What'd you say?
He wasn't president. He's chairman of the organizing committee.
Whatever he was. He was the leader of the group that put on the Maccabi games from the United States. Jackie Fields was there, but he didn't know he was there. He had Alzheimer's, but he looked great. Dick Savitt, Jimmy Jacobs, you may not know. He was one of the 2 top all-time greatest handball players. And this is Irving Jaffe, America, the United States' first Winter Olympics champion. He was an ice skater.
Awesome. Steve, you want to go to the next one?
This was the second year, 1980. That's Isaac Berger. You see his size. He was the strongest man in the world, pound for pound. Mel Allen, Ron Mix. There's Nat Holman again. This is Marshall Goldberg, football. Al Rosen, baseball. And Harry Litwack from Temple University. Coach, basketball coach.
Next, Steve.
It's the interior of the Hall of Fame.
That's the interior. Those are the triangle cases where everyone has their photo. Maybe we'll get the team in 2022, some of the kids to come and see it. We haven't been able to accomplish that over the years. Maybe in 2022, Jeff and the chairman of the organizing committee can at least get some of the athletes there to see the Hall of Fame.
And Lou Moyerman is our general chair. He's on the call tonight. So
Okay,
you heard that, right?
okay, Lou, I'm leaving it up to you to put it together.
Each one of these triangles, which are supposed to denote the points of it, there it is, of a Jewish star. If you put them together, they become a Jewish star. There's the Hebrew and there's the English bios along with the photo. And then the election information up there. Every one of them has that. That was the opening day, the day we dedicated the International. And look how thin the two of us are. And this is Kemp.
Jack Kemp.
What's his first name?
Congressman Jack Kemp.
Yes, he was a candidate for president.
Wow.
And Eliezer Shmueli, who was either the deputy or the assistant minister of education, who was our honorary president of the Hall of Fame. This is Alan's achievement this year, or one of his achievements, Yuri Liepkin, and the head of Russian ice hockey. But Yuri Liepkin is known to Russians of modern day as the tall one. He was a defensive player for the Moscow Olympic team. You know who they are. Tal Brody and David Stern. Not everybody can come to Israel at the time that we're doing the inductions. And sometimes we've been able to arrange satellite inductions, presentations, I should say, of the medal. And in this case, Tal presented the medal to David Stern. This was the last inductions in 2017. I won't go through everybody, but let's see who you might recognize.
Well, I see Lenny Silverman on the left, and he's on the call with us tonight.
Yes, there he is, yeah. Lenny. This is Elliot.
Is Donna Orender on the call? She's there.
No, she's not on the call, but she's a current officer of Maccabi USA and very much involved, but I don't think she's with us tonight.
This man here is Stephen Rubin. He's from England, and he's head of a very important sports not industrial, but company that makes Adidas, Reebok, Speedo, and a whole lot of other stuff. And he's been the honorary chairman for about 20 years at least. And this man here is Victor Weisman, who's Mr. Maccabi in South America. And he's a tennis player. Not Elliot Telcher, Brian Teacher. And this is Ari Rosenzweig. This is Uri Schaefer. This is Donna Orlander. Anyways, this was the class that got inducted in 2017.
So those are awesome. And I've been to those ceremonies, and those ceremonies are great. And are you planning to do the same in 2022?
Talk to the man on your right.
Alan?
I can't tell you. Right now, we don't know. It's just too much going on for 2022. We really don't know what will be. I can tell you that the Hall of Fame will be open on a certain day, and there will be something going on, whether it's a formal induction ceremony or an open house or something. I don't know at this point. I don't want to say yes, don't want to say no. So I know it's, we'll see. That's all I can say.
Okay. And to get back to Joe saying that sometimes people can't make it to Israel, you know, I was proud to go along with Jay Blumenfeld and present the medal to Jerry Eisenberg in Newark one night a couple of years ago. It was very nice. So I think at this stage of the game, before we go to Q&A, is there anything else you'd like to, Alan or Joe, you'd like to talk about?
No, I'm just glad that that the Maccabi USA It has a little more interest in the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. It's been a long time coming, ever since Bob left as president. We haven't had that relationship that I would like to have. So I think you doing this has been great, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alan.
And I'll add, if you didn't know, the Hall of Fame was a project of Maccabi USA for a long time. And then they decided not that we weren't a part of the official Maccabi USA, and we've been a standalone since then. And we get by. Alan gets donations. We don't really solicit them, but people send them in, and that can continue. Like to see you buy our book. That would help. But the book is not going to become a bestseller. It's a nice book to give. There was another book years ago called The Encyclopedia of Jews in Sports. And it was published by three guys who have since been elected to the Hall of Fame, the three writers of the book. It's dated. It came out in 1965. Mark Spitz, for example, is not even in the book. But it's a good history book that young people will read before they read something that they should be reading about Jewish history in general. And one last thing, I'm a little, I still have most of my hair, but it's turned gray. And as we get on in years, it's time to sometimes hand off the baton. And if you know of anybody who is interested in the historical part of Jewish athletes and in getting involved in the election process, I would like to know about them, because I'd like to talk to them, see if they would like to get themselves into the system of how it's being done. I know Alan is doing that from his side of what he does. Eventually, you have to turn it over to somebody else. As I see Ron Carter in the corner here, turn over his presidency to the man sitting in the middle, and various others that are on here. I don't know who all is there. But anyways, if you know anybody, please contact us. I'm not going to give you an email address, but you can reach me as you can, Alan, through our website.
Thank you, Joe. Lou Moyerman, I think you had something to say. Lou is our general chair for the Maccabi team for 2022, where we hope to bring the largest delegation ever to Israel, maybe as much as 1,300. Go ahead, Lou.
Thank you, Jeff. I don't know you, Joe, and I'm sorry we never met before, but Alan knows me since I was a puppy in the organization. But I would like to tell both of you, we would like to do our best with the delegation to get them to the Hall of Fame, or get them to as many people as possible to see it. So please feel free. Alan knows how to reach me. I know how to reach Alan. We can discuss this. We have some time on it. And also, I heard what you just said. So we should start trying to figure out through our athletes and coaches, maybe some people that might be interested in helping you guys as you move forward. So I just want to let you guys know that what you do is great, and we want to support it.
Oh, heck of a.
Thanks, Lou. So Joe and Alan, thanks a lot. This has been fascinating. I know some people have some questions, and Jerry Schrager, if you can unmute yourself, I know you had a question you'd like to ask.
If you can hear me, Joe and Alan, thank you for all you do for Jewish sports, and I'm going to try and order the book. A couple of names, I had a chance to look at the list, and one that jumped out at me is Nancy Lieberman, women's basketball player from Old Dominion in the 70s, generally considered the best player, at least through until 1990s. And then secondarily, I went to CCNY, and as you probably know, in 1950, they won the NCAA and NIT in the same year. Can't be done anymore, but nobody else did that. And I believe 3 of the 5 starting players were Jewish, and the most valuable player, I think both in the NIT and the NCAA, was Jewish. Were they ever considered or nominated, Nancy
Yes.
or the Jewish players?
Yes, they were. In the case of the CCNY guys, when we first started the selection process, other than the first 2 years, we had a lot of Europeans, old timers that were involved in sports, that were involved with Maccabi, Hapoel, Elitzur, sitting on a committee. And a couple of names, I remember Roth was one of the guys, wasn't he, on CCNY?
I should know, but I don't.
Oh, well, he was.
Yeah.
And they wanted to stay away from, this was 1979. They wanted to stay, no, it was 1981. They wanted to stay away from the people that were involved in the scandal of that year. It was, if you don't know, it was the biggest scandal in the United States in sports, at least at that time, or in my time. And they wanted to stay away from that. So when I took over the selection committee, I looked into it, and it turns out that there were about 4 dozen basketball players from the East Coast who they themselves considered themselves the greatest player who ever played basketball. And they played for CCNY and St. John's and for Columbia, I guess, whatever the schools were. And we elected a few of them, and we got so much heat from the people of the era that we kind of put that on a back burner, at least. They're still to be considered, but on the back burner. As far as
I
Nancy
understand.
Lieberman is concerned,
I
she was
understand,
serious.
Joe.
Pardon?
I understand. As a matter of fact, I played varsity baseball for CCNY, and we felt the effects as we took the subway to our games at Babe Ruth Field in the Bronx. We didn't have bus trips. We still felt the financial effects of that.
Yeah.
How about Nancy Lieberman?
Okay, Nancy Lieberman was actually voted upon to go in, and I called her, as it happens, and she thanked me a lot. And while I was talking to her on the phone, I had a website up. I was reading an interview she gave to somebody somewhere, and in it said, and she owed it to her Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And,
Oh boy.
and I said, that can't be right, right? She says, no, that's right. That's correct. He's my Lord and Savior. I said, but I thought you were Jewish. She says, I am. Both of my parents are Jewish. I was bat mitzvahed. In fact, my mother and I are going to Israel in 2 months. And I knew her, or I had met her. She helped out at a fundraiser for the Maccabi in 1985 in Los Angeles. She was one of the helpers. She and some basketball ladies were helping out. I said, but we can't elect you to the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is supposed to be an example to the public. These are your Jewish athletes. The Christian outreach that makes Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior, it is I think it's a Lutheran outreach program. She says, no, it's not. It's a Jewish program. Well, anyways, we put her on a back burner for someone else to make that decision.
Thanks, Joe.
So does anyone else, there's nothing in the queue here, but if anyone wants to ask a question, you can unmute yourself and raise your hand and I'll call on you. Does anyone have any questions for Joe or Alan?
I just want to say, if you're hearing me, it's Mel Miller. I want to say to Joe, I got the book a couple of weeks ago. It's fabulous. It's a fabulous collection of stories, Joe. You did a great job. And
Thank
all I can say is that I think that book should be made available to the JCCs or synagogue, wherever. It's really an enlightenment. I mean, I thought I knew most of it, but going through the pages, you did a great job. And Joe, I can't tell you how great it is. And Alan, you know, you're one of my mentors. You're the guys that brought me in here. And I just want to say it's been a great ride, and I thank you. And thanks for putting this on. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Mel. Leland and then John Harris will be next. Leland first.
I just wanted to say that if any people here aren't aware of it, the best publication on Jewish sports in America is the Jewish Sports Review, which Joe puts out with his partner, Ephraim, once a quarter. And you've just got to subscribe to that because they'll tell you everything about what's going on with Jewish sports. So, Joe, maybe you can give them the email so they can get to you.
Okay, well, I thank you for the compliment, but I don't put out the Jewish Sports Review. I contributed a column to them for several years. The two guys who do it are Shel Wallman and Ephraim Moxham.
That's
And
right.
they do a terrific, terrific job. They're on you can get them on the internet, Jewish Sports Review, REVIEW is review. And it's very inexpensive. And it's like they're at Briss's where they find out who's Jewish and who's going to be an athlete because they go back to high school and even preschool once in a while, in addition to college and pro, both men and women and who's who in Israel in sports, all sports.
It's a big help for us identifying the Jewish athletes when we do outreach. Oh, John Harris, you've been waiting patiently.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Joe and Alan for the good work they do. I had the good fortune of playing tennis in Maccabi seniors in 1981. And it just so happened that's when they had an induction at, maybe it's when they opened the Jewish Sports Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And my half brother, it was Barney Dreyfuss II. Barney Dreyfuss was the founder of the Pittsburgh Pirates at the turn of the century. He was the founder of the World Series. He was one of the guys that brought in the commissioner in baseball, and he built the first modern stadium in baseball. And as I told Alan the other day, he died in 1932. In 2008, he was finally inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. My brother had passed away, but my nephew gave the speech, and my son and I got to play golf in the Hall of Fame golf tournament with all the players. But again, it was a wonderful experience, and the facility is great, and you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Harry Swimmer, I think you had a question?
No, I don't have a question, just a comment. It's great to see my old friends and some of the new friends, and that dog that jumped up on my lap is Jewish, I promise. And Siegman, the picture you had in the book of me, I just want you to know that you cut it in half. The other person in that picture was Claire Sherman, gorgeous Claire Sherman, and Alan's not mad at me. So
She's in the other book. She's in the other book.
She's in the other book.
Yeah.
So I'm looking around here. Anyone else want to say something? Yeah, Roy, go ahead.
Yeah, how you doing, Jeff? Great program. And I just want to say, you know, Alan and Joe, what a tremendous job you've done all these years, because you guys have taken it on your back to carry this through. And it shows you what two individuals can do to bring about something as great as this Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. And you really have to be complimented for all the work you've done, the dedication you've shown, really the Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, but really to the world Jewish community. And Jeff, I don't know, you maybe mentioned a little bit, but your dad is in the Sports Hall of Fame as an Olympic fencer.
Yep, and a referee. It was
And a referee. And I didn't know the referee part, but that's great. Anyway, this was a wonderful program. It's nice seeing a lot of familiar faces.
Thanks.
Oh,
So I'd like
thank
to
you.
anyone wants to ask a question, please raise your hand. I'm surfing between two screens here. If anyone wants to chime in or say something or ask a question. Anyone else?
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
If the world ever gets normal or close to it again, and you're looking for a speaker to talk about this stuff, and I won't sell books, just available to speak, I'd like to share some of this information, because the questions are what's great, not what I want to say myself, because people have such great questions about this stuff. So again, I'm contactable. Maybe Alan would like to go out too, but we're reachable if you don't know where to get us through the Hall of Fame website.
That's great. And I think there was a question from Mr. Goldsmith. Did you have a question? Please unmute. You have to unmute yourself. If you can unmute yourself. You have to unmute. You have to push the unmute button if you can find it. Uh-oh.
Okay. I wanted to share my thoughts too that
Uh-oh. Hey, Steve,
Bob, I told you to get a new Logitech camera.
Steve, maybe mute everybody to get whoever that problem is. Let's get that muted, Steve. Steve, and then let's open up to Bob Spivak so Bob can speak.
I wanted to, I'm sorry, my mute was on. I want to congratulate the two of them. They've done a great job over the years of having this program. And we just started to distribute some of the books to the participants at the golf tournament in Florida a couple years ago. And I think it would be a good idea if we follow up by sending out some information so people can purchase the book if they like. It's great reading. And the newest inductee is Roy Solomon from Canada. And I want to congratulate Roy on that this night. A good program, Jeff. Well done.
Jeff, could I jump in? Jeff, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Go for it. But I just want to say, as part of our current campaign to raise enough money to carry off this project, I will commit to make sure that everyone who makes a new donation of $25,000 or more, we will send you a book. Jeff, you're muted.
Hey, Don, that will mean that for $10,000 and $25 to buy the book, they can get to the same place.
So,
Okay, you twisted my arm. 10,000 or more.
so levity aside, you know, we are going to be sending up to 1,300 athletes or team to Israel. It's a huge project. We're in the midst of a big capital campaign right now, and we do need people's help, especially so that we can provide scholarship for the athletes in need. So for those of you who are inclined, www.maccabiusa.com, and we appreciate everyone who supported us and who would consider supporting us. And we do support your book too, because I believe, Marshall, we sent out an email blast to our membership plugging the book, and we will continue to do so, Joe. Okay, so before we sign off, does anyone else have a question? I think that's pretty much it. It was a wonderful evening. It's really good to see some old friends. And Steve, with that, I'll turn it back to you.